One punch for 30 grand, old man. Think you got it in you. The voice, belonging to the heavyweight champion King Kyler, cut through the humid air of the gym like a shard of glass. It was loud, performative, meant for the audience of young fighters and hangers-on that orbited him like moons around a gas giant. They chuckled on cue, a chorus of sycophants. The scene was a tableau of casual cruelty. Kyler, gleaming with sweat and self-importance, his fists taped, a smirk plastered on his face. And across from him, the object of his ridicule. Samuel Washington did not react. He continued his work, his hand moving a clean, soft cloth in slow, overlapping circles across the vast mirror that lined the wall. His reflection moved with him, a man of 67 years, his posture straight, his hair a close-cropped crown of silver. The blue fabric of his janitor's uniform was immaculate. He saw the champion in the mirror, saw the smirking crowd behind him. He felt the weight of their collective gaze, but his expression remained a mask of placid neutrality. His eyes, dark and deep, held a history the boy in the mirror couldn't possibly comprehend, a universe of discipline and pain and quiet victories. What the young champion didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the steady hands holding that cleaning rag had once been wrapped for an entirely different purpose, in rooms far louder and more dangerous than this. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The first light of morning was the color of weak tea. It filtered through the slats of the blinds in Samuel Washington's small, tidy bedroom, striping the opposite wall with pale gold. It was 5:03 a.m. He didn't need an alarm clock. His body, a finely tuned instrument of habit and discipline, knew the time. For 45 years, since his time in the service and the life that came after, his day had begun in this quiet space between true night and early dawn. He rose, the movement fluid, without the groans or stiffness that plagued many men his age. He made his bed, pulling the worn quilt up and smoothing it with methodical precision. The corners were tucked into sharp, military-grade angles. Order. It was the first principle. In the kitchen, the ritual continued. The smell of coffee beans, rich and dark, filled the small space as he ground them by hand. The rhythmic crunch of the grinder was the first sound of his day, a private percussion. He measured the water. He measured the grounds. He waited as the coffee maker hissed and sputtered, filling a white ceramic mug that his wife, Eleanor, had given him on their 20th anniversary. She had been gone for a decade, but her presence was a quiet, foundational hum beneath the surface of his life. He could feel her in the heft of the mug, in the arrangement of the small succulents on the windowsill, in the profound peace of this house. He took his coffee to the small porch out back, which overlooked a meticulously tended garden. He sat, the morning air cool against his skin, and watched the sky slowly brighten from indigo to a soft, hopeful blue. He didn't think about the day ahead. He didn't dwell on the past. He simply existed in this pocket of time, this sacred interval. He let himself feel the warmth of the mug for exactly 15 minutes. Then, he went inside, rinsed the mug, and placed it upside down on the drying rack. His work uniform was already laid out. Crisp, clean, the name Samuel stitched in white thread over the right pocket. He dressed with the same deliberate care he applied to everything. The man who showed up to work was the same man who lived in this house. There was no difference. Dignity was not a coat you put on and took off. It was your skin. The walk to the Apex Boxing and Athletics Club was just under a mile. He enjoyed the walk. It was a transition. He left the quiet sanctuary of his home and moved toward the world. He observed the neighborhood waking up, a woman watering her porch ferns, a man getting into his truck, the distant rumble of the city's first bus. He nodded to the people he knew, a silent acknowledgement of shared existence. He arrived at the gym at 6:15 a.m., letting himself in with his own key. This was his favorite time of day here. The building was silent, holding its breath. The air was thick with the ghosts of yesterday's effort, the faint, metallic tang of sweat, the leathery scent of the heavy bags, the sharp, medicinal smell of liniment. But it was a settled smell, not the chaotic, active assault it would become in a few hours. In this quiet, he was not a janitor. He was the custodian of a temple. He moved through the cavernous space, his footsteps echoing softly. He started with the floors, pushing a wide, soft-bristled broom, gathering the dust and tape ends and rosin from the corners. He worked from the outside in, a slow spiral toward the center, toward the two elevated rings that stood like altars under the high bay lights. He didn't rush. The work was a meditation. Each sweep of the broom, each wipe of a cloth, was a small act of restoring order. This place, this temple of controlled violence, was where boys became men, and sometimes, where men became monsters. He had seen both. He cleaned away the evidence of it all, making the space new again for another day of struggle. He felt a sense of ownership in these quiet hours, a peaceful proprietorship that would evaporate the moment the front doors were unlocked for business. He saw his son's face in a photograph on the wall of trainers, Marcus Washington, head coach. A pang of pride, sharp and warm. That was his boy, a good man, a man who understood respect. By the time he was polishing the wall-length mirrors, the first of the early bird amateurs were beginning to trickle in, their gym bags slung over their shoulders, their faces still soft with sleep. They nodded to him. "Morning, Mr. Washington." "Good morning, son," he would reply, his voice calm and even. He was a fixture, a part of the building itself, as permanent and overlooked as the steel beams in the ceiling. And that was how he preferred it, to be seen but not noticed, to do his work and maintain his peace. But peace was a fragile thing in a place like this. He knew that better than anyone. He had learned a long time ago that the loudest man in the room was usually the most fragile. And the champion, King Kyler, was the loudest man Samuel had ever heard. The gym began to thrum with life around 9 a.m. The rhythmic thud-thud-thud of fists on heavy bags became the building's heartbeat. The staccato slap of speed bags, the grunts of exertion, the sharp calls of the trainers, it all blended into a symphony of effort. This was the sound of ambition, raw and palpable. Samuel continued his work, moving along the periphery, an unobtrusive ghost. He emptied trash bins, refilled water coolers, wiped down benches slick with the sweat of striving men. He was invisible in the best way, a silent facilitator of their dreams. Then, at precisely 10:17 a.m., the energy in the room shifted. It was as if a switch had been flipped. The ambient noise didn't stop, but its texture changed, becoming more charged, more deferential. That was the first thing Samuel noticed. The change in the sound. King Kyler had arrived. He didn't just walk in. He made an entrance. Flanked by two sparring partners who looked more like bodyguards and a wiry manager who was never more than a step behind, Kyler strode into the center of the gym as if he owned it. Which, in a way, he did. His face was on the posters that advertised the gym's biggest pay-per-view events. His championship belts, gaudy constructions of leather and gold, were displayed in a glass case by the front desk. He was 28 years old, undefeated, and possessed an arrogance so profound it seemed to have its own gravitational pull. "Clear the ring," Kyler's voice boomed, directed at two young amateurs who were sparring in the main ring. He didn't ask. He commanded. The young men, startled, immediately stopped and began climbing through the ropes, murmuring apologies that weren't required. Kyler vaulted over the top rope, a piece of performative athleticism, and began to bounce on the balls of his feet, his gloved hands held high. His entourage set about their tasks, holding his water bottle, adjusting his headgear, their movements practiced and fawning. Samuel watched this from across the room, where he was cleaning the vinyl on a leg press machine. He had seen many champions come and go. Some were quiet professionals, men whose confidence was an internal, unshakable core. Others, like Kyler, wore their greatness like a costume, loud and bright, needing constant affirmation from the world around them. Kyler was the second kind, the dangerous kind, the kind of man who confused fear with respect. For the next hour, the gym was Kyler's stage. His grunts were louder, his punches on the pads landed with a more theatrical crack, his shouted instructions to his sparring partners were laced with contempt. He was a bully in his natural habitat. Samuel continued his circuit, his path eventually bringing him near the main ring. He kept his head down, focusing on the task of wiping down the row of stationary bikes. He knew better than to make eye contact. But Kyler, in a brief rest between rounds, noticed him. The champion was leaning against the ropes, taking a swig of water, when his eyes fell on the old man in the blue uniform. A smirk played on his lips. He said something to one of his sparring partners, who laughed. Samuel felt their eyes on him, a familiar, prickling sensation. He kept wiping. The first act of disrespect was small. Kyler, finished with his water, tossed the empty plastic bottle onto the floor, a few feet from where Samuel was working. Not in a trash can, which was only a few steps away. On the floor. It was a test. A power play. Samuel paused his work for a beat. He looked at the bottle, then slowly straightened up. He walked over, bent down with a steady, unhurried motion, and picked it up. He then walked it to the trash can and dropped it in. He did not look at Kyler. He simply returned to his bike and resumed wiping. The lack of reaction seemed to annoy the champion more than any retort would have. A few minutes later, it happened again. After a furious combination on the heavy bag, Kyler stripped off his sweat-soaked gloves and, instead of handing them to his cornerman, he tossed them onto the floor in Samuel's direction. "Hey, old man," he called out, his voice dripping with condescension. "Clean those up for me, will ya? They're starting to stink." This time, the gym quieted slightly. More people were watching now. This was more direct, more personal. Samuel stopped his work again. He looked at the gloves lying on the mat. He had learned a long time ago that a man's character is revealed in these small moments. He walked over. He did not pick up the gloves. He looked up at King Kyler, his gaze level and calm. "Your gear is your own responsibility, son," he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried in the suddenly hushed room. It was a simple statement of fact. A flicker of surprise, then anger, crossed Kyler's face. He was not used to being denied. Not here. He vaulted out of the ring, his boots thudding on the mat. He strode over to Samuel, deliberately crowding his space, forcing the older man to take a half-step back. It was the classic behavioral signature of a bully, physical intimidation. "What did you say to me?" Kyler's voice was low, menacing. He was a good 6 inches taller than Samuel and nearly 100 pounds heavier, all of it coiled muscle. "I said," Samuel repeated, his tone unchanged. "Your gear is your own responsibility." He did not break eye contact. He did not shrink. Kyler laughed, a short, ugly sound. He looked around at his audience, playing to the crowd. "An old janitor trying to tell me about responsibility?" He shook his head in mock disbelief. Then the idea seemed to strike him, a flash of cruel inspiration. He looked Samuel up and down, a dismissive, appraising glance. "You know what? I'm feeling generous," Kyler announced to the room. "Tell you what, old man. You look like you might have been tough once. 100 years ago," the sycophants laughed again. "How about this? One punch. You let me land one clean punch on you. Not even my best. Just one. You stay on your feet. I give you $30,000. He pulled a thick wad of cash from the pocket of his gym shorts and riffled the edges. The money was a prop. The offer was an instrument of humiliation. "One punch for 30 grand, old man. Think you got it in you." The proposition hung in the air, thick and vile. It wasn't an offer. It was a degradation. It was a public declaration that Samuel's body, his dignity, was a commodity to be purchased for the champion's amusement. Samuel's face remained a stoic mask, but inside, something old and cold stirred. He felt the anger the way a furnace feels heat, a deep, contained burn. But his discipline was a wall of firebrick, forged over a lifetime of such moments. He simply shook his head, a small, final gesture. "I'm not interested," he said, his voice quiet. "I'm here to do my work." Kyler's face tightened. The refusal, the quiet dignity, was an affront. He wanted a reaction. He wanted fear, or pleading, or even a show of pathetic, old man anger. This composure was infuriating. It was a mirror he didn't want to look in. "Not interested?" Kyler scoffed, stepping closer still. His voice rose, becoming a public address. "What's the matter, Pops? Scared? It's 30 grand. That's probably more than you make in a year scrubbing floors." The slur, the casual contempt for his labor, landed like a physical blow in the narrative of the room. A few of the younger fighters, who had once looked at Kyler with awe, now shifted uncomfortably. A line had been crossed. One of those fighters was a welterweight named Leo, a kid with quick hands and a good heart. He stood by the speed bag, his work forgotten. He saw the injustice of it clearly. On instinct, he pulled out his phone, holding it low by his side. The screen was black, but the red dot of the recording light was on. He didn't know why he was doing it, only that what was happening felt wrong, and wrong things should have a record. From across the gym, the manager, A portly man named Henderson watched the scene unfold from the doorway of his office. He had a phone to his ear, pretending to be on a call. He did nothing. Henderson's primary business was keeping his star attraction, King Kyler, happy. The comfort of a janitor was not a factor in that equation. His inaction was a form of consent, an institutional shield that allowed Kyler's cruelty to flourish. "I asked you a question," Kyler pressed, his face now just inches from Samuel's. The smell of his sweat was overpowering. "Are you scared?" Samuel held his ground. The silence that followed lasted about 3 heartbeats. In that silence, Samuel was not thinking about the $30,000 or the fist of the man in front of him. He was thinking of his son, Marcus. He was thinking of what he had always taught him, that your response to disrespect is a measure of your self-respect. You do not borrow your dignity from the opinions of others. You own it. "There is nothing you have that I want, son," Samuel said, his voice still level, still impossibly calm. It was a dismissal so complete, so profound, that it left Kyler momentarily speechless. The champion's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. Humiliated by the old man's refusal to play the victim, he needed to reassert his dominance physically. He didn't throw a punch. That would be too simple, too honest. Instead, he did something worse. He reached out, grabbed the collar of Samuel's clean blue uniform, and yanked him forward. "You work for this gym," Kyler snarled, his voice a low growl. "And I am this gym. You work for me. Now pick up my damn gloves and clean them before I lose my patience." He shoved Samuel backward. It wasn't a hard shove, but it was contemptuous, designed to make him stumble, to make him look weak and foolish. Samuel's feet, planted firmly, slid back only a foot. He did not fall. He simply absorbed the force, his body a testament to a lifetime of balance and control. He looked down at the gloves on the floor. Then he looked back at Kyler. He didn't need anyone to tell him what had happened. This was no longer a simple matter of disrespect. It was an assault. He let himself feel the white-hot flash of rage for exactly 1 second. Then he contained it, packed it away deep inside. Action required a cool mind. Slowly, deliberately, he bent down. The entire gym was watching now, a silent circle of spectators. Kyler smirked, believing he had won. Samuel's hand reached for the sweaty, foul-smelling leather. He picked up one glove, then the other. He straightened up, holding them. He didn't throw them. He didn't wipe them. He simply held them for a moment, then turned and walked to the nearest hazardous waste bin, the one meant for soiled bandages and medical tape. He lifted the lid and dropped the gloves inside. The finality of the act was stunning. It was a declaration more powerful than any shout. Kyler stared, his mouth agape. "You," he stammered, his fury robbing him of words. He took a step towards Samuel, his fist clenching. And that was the moment the side door to the gym swung open. In walked Marcus Washington, Samuel's son, the head coach. He was carrying a bag of new Focus mitts, a smile on his face that vanished the instant he took in the scene. The champion, incandescent with rage, advancing on his father, who stood, calm and alone, by a trash can. Marcus dropped the bag. The thud echoed in the tense silence. His eyes, so much like his father's, narrowed. What the hell is going on here? Marcus Washington moved with the coiled energy of a man who understood the mechanics of a fight better than almost anyone. He didn't rush or shout. He placed himself between Kyler and his father, a simple, decisive movement that shifted the entire dynamic of the room. His presence was a different kind of authority from Kyler's. It was earned, not claimed. The younger fighters in the gym respected Marcus. He was tough, but fair, a teacher, not a tyrant. "Get out of my way, coach," Kyler snarled, though his advance had stalled. He had not expected Marcus. "I'm not going to ask you again, Kyler. What is going on?" Marcus's voice was low and tight, each word a carefully controlled release of pressure. He looked from Kyler's furious face to his father's impassive one. He could read the story in the air. "Your old man has a problem with authority," Kyler spat, gesturing dismissively towards Samuel. "He needs to learn his place." Marcus's jaw clenched. "His place?" he repeated, the words tasting like poison. "His name is Samuel Washington, and his place is wherever he damn well pleases. This is his gym as much as it is yours. His sweat is in the foundation of this building." He took a step toward Kyler. "Now, you're going to back up, and you're going to walk away." For a moment, It seemed Kyler might challenge him. But something in Marcus's eyes, not anger, but a cold, absolute certainty, made him hesitate. To fight a coach, his own coach in a sense, was a line even he wouldn't cross in public. With a final, contemptuous glare at Samuel, Kyler turned and stalked back to his entourage, muttering threats. This isn't over. As soon as Kyler was out of earshot, Marcus turned to his father. The fury he had contained in front of the champion now flooded his face. Dad, tell me what happened. Exactly what happened. Samuel looked at his son. He saw the protective rage in his eyes, the same fire he'd had as a boy when a neighborhood bully had broken his favorite toy. Let's go to the office, Samuel said quietly. Not here. They walked to the small, cluttered coach's office that Marcus shared with two other trainers. Marcus shut the door, the sound of the gym instantly muffled. He put his hands on you, Marcus said. It wasn't a question. I saw him shove you. It was a small thing, Samuel said, but Marcus cut him off. There's no such thing as a small thing when a man puts his hands on you, Dad. Not him. Not on you. He paced the small room, a caged panther. That's it. I'm going to Henderson. I'm going to the board. Kyler's contract has a morals clause. This is a breach. A big one. Assaulting an employee? He's done. Samuel sat down in the worn-out chair opposite the desk. He watched his son's anger, understanding it, but knowing it was a wild horse that could trample the rider. And what will happen? He asked calmly. What do you mean, what will happen? He'll be suspended. Fine. We'll make sure he will be suspended for a few weeks, Samuel interrupted, his voice still even. He will pay a fine that means nothing to him. His manager will issue a public apology that Kyler did not write and does not mean. And then he will come back. And nothing will have changed. The machine will reset. The machine metaphor. It was a concept Samuel had explained to Marcus years ago. The world was full of systems, of machines designed to produce a certain outcome. The justice system, corporate ladders, the politics of a boxing gym. They were all machines. And this one was designed to protect its most profitable part, King Kyler. A momentary suspension was just routine maintenance. It wouldn't fix the rot inside. So we do nothing? Marcus asked, his voice laced with frustration. We just let him get away with it. I didn't say we do nothing, Samuel replied. He leaned forward slightly. I said your way is a fire. You want to burn him. But fire is messy. It burns everything around the target. Sometimes, it burns the one who lit it. What this requires is not fire. It requires a tool. Something precise. Marcus stopped pacing. He looked at his father, really looked at him. At the unshakable composure, the deep, strategic intelligence in his eyes. He had seen this look before, but rarely. It was the look his father got when he was solving a complex problem, mapping out a path through a maze. He offered me $30,000, Samuel said, stating it as a simple fact, to let him land one punch. That was a humiliation, Dad, not an offer. Everything is a tool, son, Samuel said. Or a weapon. It depends on whose hands it's in. His pride is a weapon he uses on others. We can make it a tool to use on him. The office door creaked open. An old man with a face like a road map and cauliflower ears poked his head in. It was Pops, the gym's ancient, semi-retired cut man. He had been there since the gym opened 50 years ago. He had seen everything. Saw the whole thing. Pops said, his voice a gravelly rasp. He looked at Samuel with a deep, knowing respect. The boy has no idea, does he, Sam? Marcus looked between the two old men. No idea about what? Pops shuffled into the room, closing the door behind him. He ignored Marcus for a moment and spoke directly to Samuel. There comes a time for patience, and there comes a time for education. That boy, he needs an education. The kind you can't get from a book. He then turned to Marcus. Your father. He's more than just the man who cleans the floors, kid. A lot more. Pops squinted at Marcus, then at Samuel. People forget, he rasped again. Or they never knew. This place, this whole culture of arrogance. It's a sickness. And sometimes, the only cure is a dose of history. He gestured with a gnarled thumb over his shoulder. Come with me. Both of you. There's something you need to see. Pops led them not out into the gym, but toward a narrow, unmarked door at the back of the building, next to the boiler room. It opened onto a steep set of wooden stairs that descended into a dark, musty basement. The air grew cooler, thick with the smell of damp concrete and old paper. Pops flicked a switch, and a single, Bare bulbs sputtered to life, casting a weak, yellow glow over a small, cluttered storage room. It was filled with forgotten equipment, a cracked speed bag platform, a rusted weight bench, stacks of yellowed boxing magazines. In the center of the room, like a treasure chest in a forgotten tomb, sat a large, black, metal footlocker. It was dented and scarred, secured with a heavy brass padlock. Pops pulled a key from a chain around his neck and unlocked it. The click of the lock was loud in the silence. He lifted the heavy lid. "Your father never talked much," Pops said, looking at Marcus. "So I did the keeping for him." He reached inside and began to pull out the contents. It was a curated archive of a life Marcus had only ever heard about in fragments. The box of evidence. The first thing Pops pulled out was a stack of newspaper clippings, their edges brittle and brown. He handed one to Marcus. The headline, from a 1978 edition of the city's evening paper, read, "Silent Sam, Washington stuns contender with masterclass in defense." The article beneath it described a fighter who was a ghost in the ring, a defensive genius who frustrated his opponents into exhaustion and then dismantled them with precise, devastating counterpunches. Marcus stared at the grainy black and white photo next to the headline. It was his father. Younger, leaner, his face unlined, but the eyes were the same. Calm, intelligent, focused. Pops laid out more artifacts on a dusty table. A fight poster, beautifully illustrated, advertising a bout at the Old City Arena. Samuel Silent Sam, Washington versus Dynamite Danny Jones, an old pair of boxing gloves, the leather cracked and dark with age, far more worn than the ones Kyler had thrown on the floor. And then, a small, velvet-lined box. Inside was a gold medal on a faded ribbon. 1975 Pan American Games, Pops said quietly. He never even showed it to your mother. Said it was from another life. Marcus felt a wave of dizziness. He had known his father boxed. It was a fact, like knowing his father had served in the army. But it was an abstract fact. He had never understood the reality of it, the depth of it. This was different. This was a legacy. "Why did you stop?" Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper, directed at his father. "You were this good. Why?" Samuel looked at the memorabilia spread out on the table, his face betraying no emotion. "It stopped being about the sport," he said. "It started being about other things. Money. Favors. Promoters who wanted you to take a fall in the 5th round because they had a lot of money riding on your opponent." Pops nodded grimly. He was set for a title shot against the champ. Biggest fight of his life. A promoter, a real snake named Vinny Gallo, came to him, told him the script. Go 9 rounds. Make it look good, then take a dive in the 10th. They'd pay him well, more than the official purse. I said no, Samuel continued, his voice flat. I told him the fight in the ring was the only thing that was real. The rest was just noise. He told me if I didn't play along, I'd never fight for a title. He'd make sure of it. And he did. Pops finished. Gallo blackballed him. Put the word out. Suddenly, no one would schedule a fight with Silent Sam. They said he was too risky, too slick. The truth was, they were all afraid of Gallo. Sam's shot just evaporated. So he walked away, with his head held high and his pockets empty. He came here, to this gym, and asked for a job. Any job. Said he just wanted to be around the sport he loved. He never told anyone who he was. Marcus looked from the clippings to his father, the quiet man who cleaned floors and offered gentle nods in the hallway. He was looking at a king in exile. The quiet authority, the unshakable composure, the physical discipline, it all snapped into focus. It wasn't the placidness of a simple man. It was the deep, centered calm of a warrior who had faced his battles and made his peace. So that's it, Marcus said, a new kind of anger building inside him, colder and harder than the hot rage from before. That's why you don't want me to go to Henderson. Because you know the machine is rigged. It was rigged against you then, and it's rigged for Kyler now. The machine is a river, Samuel said, picking up one of the old gloves and running a thumb over the cracked leather. You can't stop it by throwing a rock in it, but you can change its course, if you know where to apply the pressure. A new understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. He looked at the clippings, at the metal, at his father. He looked at Kyler's arrogant proposition not as an insult, but as an opportunity, a stage. His pride, Marcus said, the plan beginning to form in his mind. That's the pressure point. Pride is a hollow vessel, Samuel agreed. It makes a lot of noise, but it shatters with one good tap. Pops grinned, a network of wrinkles spreading across his face. So what's the plan, coach? He asked Marcus. Are we going to give that boy his education? Marcus looked at his father, a silent question passing between them. Samuel gave a slow, deliberate nod. Just one. It was all the confirmation Marcus needed. The fire in his chest was gone, replaced by a cold, clear purpose. This would not be about revenge. This would be about justice. A lesson delivered with the quiet precision of a master. A lesson in history, respect, and the true meaning of the word champion. The basement became their war room. The single, bare bulb cast long shadows as the three men, the son, the father, and the keeper of memories, forged their counterattack. It was a strategy built not on brute force, but on psychology and theater. It can't be a fight, Marcus said, pacing the small concrete floor. If Dad gets in the ring for a real fight, it legitimizes Kyler's premise that this is a contest between two brawlers. It's not. This is a lesson. He's right. Pops agreed, tapping a yellowed newspaper clipping. Sam's greatest weapon was never his punch. It was his mind. He made other fighters punch themselves out. He made them look foolish. Samuel, who had been listening quietly, spoke. Kyler offered a punch. A transaction. We need to turn it into a performance. A demonstration. He looked at his son. His ego is the trap. He believes he is invincible. He believes I am nothing. We use both beliefs against him. The plan took shape with beautiful, dangerous clarity. They would accept Kyler's challenge, but they would reframe it entirely. It would not be about Samuel surviving a punch. It would be about Kyler failing to land one. Here are the terms, Marcus said, his voice low and intense. 1 round. 3 minutes. That's it. Kyler has to land one single, clean, significant punch. Not a jab, not a graze. A real punch. If he does, Dad will. We'll do what he said. Work for him for a year. The ultimate humiliation. Pops grimaced. That's a hell of a risk, kid. No, Samuel said softly. It is not. The confidence in his voice was absolute. It was not arrogance. It was knowledge. And if he fails? Pops asked. If he fails, Marcus continued, a sharp glint in his eye. 2 things happen. 1, he pays the $30,000 as offered. But he doesn't pay it to my father. He pays it to the gym, to start a youth outreach program for kids in this neighborhood who can't afford the membership fees. We make it public. We make him the generous benefactor of a program born from his own ugliness. Pops let out a low whistle. The poetry of it was not lost on him. 2, Marcus went on, he apologizes. Not some press release apology. A real one. In the center of that ring, on a microphone, to my father, in front of the entire gym. He will say his name. He will acknowledge his work. He will apologize for his disrespect. The plan was perfect in its architecture. It attacked Kyler on every front. His pride, his wallet, and his public image. To refuse would make him look like a coward, afraid of an old janitor. To accept, in his mind, would be a guaranteed victory. He would be walking into a trap of his own making. But Henderson, Pops said, raising the crucial obstacle. The manager. He'll never agree to this. It's a risk for his golden goose. That's the next step, Marcus said, his face hardening. Henderson is not a man of morals, but he is a man of business. And right now, he's exposed. He turned to his father. Dad, are you willing to file a police report? For the assault. Samuel considered it for a moment. It would become his word against mine, he said. He would claim I was insubordinate. His lawyers would tie it up. It is a tool, but a blunt 1-inch. It doesn't matter if it succeeds, Marcus explained. It only matters that we file it. The moment we file that report, Henderson has a PR crisis on his hands. Champion boxer assaults elderly janitor, the press would eat it alive. His sponsors would get nervous. The machine is designed to protect Kyler, but only when it's quiet. A police report is not quiet. This was the leverage. Marcus would go to Henderson not with a plea, but with a choice. He could deal with a messy, public, unpredictable legal battle that could tarnish the gym and its champion. Or he could agree to facilitate their demonstration, a controlled, in-house event that, if spun correctly, could even look like a quirky human interest story. Henderson, the consummate pragmatist, would choose the path of least resistance. He would choose to manage the problem rather than let it explode. He would become their unwilling accomplice. And the proof, Pops added, gesturing to the box of clippings. When do we use this? Not yet, Marcus said. We hold it. The world will see my father as a janitor. Kyler will see him as a janitor. That is essential. The reveal of who he is. That's the final act. That's the punchline. Before they left the basement, Marcus looked at his father. The weight of the decision was on him. Dad, you don't have to do this. We can walk away. I can quit. We can. Your mother, Samuel said, cutting him off gently, always said that you don't walk away from a fight for your own dignity. That's the only one you're required to show up for. He placed a hand on his son's shoulder. This is not for me, Marcus. It's for the idea of this place. It's for every young man who comes here to learn how to be strong and is instead taught how to be cruel. We are not just fixing a problem. We are restoring a balance. The decision was made. The plan was set. As they ascended the stairs, leaving the ghosts of the past in the darkness below, they were no longer just a father and a son. They were partners in a precise and dangerous operation, ready to turn the gears of the machine against itself. The next morning, Marcus Washington walked into Henderson's office and closed the door behind him. Henderson, the gym manager, looked up from his computer, a practiced, neutral expression on his face. Marcus, what can I do for you? You can listen, Marcus said, his tone leaving no room for pleasantries. He didn't sit. He stood, creating a subtle power imbalance. Yesterday, your champion, King Kyler, verbally and physically assaulted my father in the middle of the gym floor. You were there. You watched it happen. And you did nothing. Henderson leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. It was a pose of calm authority, but Marcus could see the slight tension in his jaw. Now, Marcus, assault is a strong word. Kyler is a high-energy guy. Things can get heated in a training environment. He put his hands on a 67-year-old man. Marcus cut in, his voice like ice. That's not heated, that's assault. And my father is prepared to file a formal police report to that effect. Today, the manager's mask slipped for a fraction of a second. A flicker of genuine alarm moved behind his eyes. He knew exactly what that meant. He saw the headlines. He heard the frantic calls from sponsors. He felt the heat from the boxing commission. It was a disaster. Let's not be hasty, Henderson said, his voice now more conciliatory. I'm sure we can handle this internally. I'll have a word with Kyler. We can arrange for a formal apology. An apology is not sufficient, Marcus stated. The disrespect was public. The resolution must also be public. And Kyler himself has already proposed the format. Marcus then laid out the plan. The one-round challenge. The terms. The apology. The donation to the youth program. He presented it not as a request, but as a solution to Henderson's problem. A way to contain the damage and turn a potential catastrophe into a controlled spectacle. Henderson listened, his expression shifting from alarm to calculation. He was a businessman. He was weighing the costs and benefits. A messy public scandal versus a bizarre but manageable in-house event. He saw the angle. He could spin it. Tough as nails Janitor takes on champ in charity sparring match. It had potential. It was certainly better than the alternative. Kyler will never go for the apology part, Henderson said, probing for weakness. He will, Marcus said with confidence. Because his ego won't let him believe it's a possibility he'll lose. He'll see this as a chance to publicly dominate my father and walk away a hero. He won't even hear the part about the apology. Henderson was quiet for a long time. The gears of the machine were turning in his head. Finally, he nodded slowly. All right, Marcus. I'll talk to him. I'll frame it as a charity exhibition. But if this goes sideways, it's on you. The only thing that's going to go sideways, Marcus replied, is Kyler's reputation. You just make sure the stage is set. Later that day, Marcus found Kyler holding court by the heavy bags. He approached, his demeanor calm and professional. The trap was ready to be set. Kyler, Marcus said, his voice loud enough for the champion's entourage to hear. I need a word. Kyler turned, a smug look on his face. Come to apologize for your crazy old man, coach. On the contrary, Marcus said smoothly. I've come with a message from my father. He has considered your very public and generous offer. Kyler's interest was piqued. He crossed his arms, enjoying the attention. Oh yeah? The old man finally decided he wants his payday. He's not interested in your money, Marcus said. He's interested in your challenge. But he finds the idea of you landing just one punch to be Unchallenging. For you. That is, the subtle barb was expertly placed, designed to needle Kyler's pride. Is that so? Kyler scoffed. It is, Marcus affirmed. So he's making a counteroffer. A public demonstration of skill. 1 3-minute round, right here in this ring. All you have to do is land one clean, solid punch. Just one. If you can do it, he will publicly concede your superiority and, as a sign of his respect, he will personally clean and maintain your private training area for 1 year, free of charge. Kyler's eyes lit up. The prospect was delicious. Not just beating the old man, but utterly subjugating him, making him his personal servant. And if I can't? Kyler asked, the question purely academic in his mind. If, by some miracle, you can't land a single punch in 3 minutes, Marcus said, his expression deadpan, then you will honor your original offer of $30,000. But you will donate it to the gym to start a new youth program. And then you will take the microphone and offer my father a simple, public apology for your conduct. That's it. The entourage chuckled. The terms were laughable. 3 minutes to land a punch on a senior citizen? It was an eternity. Kyler threw his head back and roared with laughter. It was the sound of a man walking gleefully into a snare. You've got a deal, coach, he boomed. Friday, high noon. I want everyone to see this. I want to see the look on his face when he has to polish my spit bucket. He sealed his fate with a handshake, his grip arrogant and firm. As Marcus walked away, he made eye contact with Leo, the young welterweight. Leo gave him a subtle nod. He had been standing nearby, his phone once again discreetly recording. He now had the audio of Kyler eagerly agreeing to the terms. Another piece of evidence, stored and waiting. Marcus met his gaze and nodded back. Trust the process. Word spread through the gym like wildfire. The demonstration was scheduled for Friday. Henderson, true to his word, framed it as a charity event, though the tension beneath the surface was palpable to anyone who had witnessed the initial confrontation. A local sports blogger, tipped off by Henderson who was trying to control the narrative, wrote a short, dismissive piece about it. King Kyler's big heart. Champ to spar with Janitor for charity. The tone was condescending, painting Samuel as a pitiable figure and Kyler as a benevolent king. It was exactly what Marcus and his father wanted. The lower the world's expectations, the more profound the lesson would be. The stage was getting bigger, and the fall would be that much greater. The 2 days leading up to the Friday demonstration were a study in contrasts. For King Kyler, it was business as usual, amplified. He strutted around the gym with an extra layer of swagger, openly mocking the upcoming fight. He'd shadowbox in front of Samuel while he was mopping, throwing exaggerated, slow-motion punches and laughing. Get ready, old man. The king is coming for you, he'd shout, to the delight of his crew. He saw the event as a coronation of his own magnanimity and power, a piece of public relations theater where he was the unquestioned star. For Samuel Washington, these days were an exercise in profound, deliberate calm. He came to work at his usual time. He performed his duties with the same meticulous care. He swept the floors, polished the mirrors, and nodded politely to the fighters who now watched him with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. He did not react to Kyler's taunts. He did not engage with the whispers. He was a rock in the middle of a stream, the water of their speculation and disrespect simply flowing around him. His composure was so absolute it was unsettling. It wasn't the behavior of a man about to be publicly humiliated. It was the behavior of a man who knew the outcome was already decided. The night before the demonstration, Thursday evening, was the quiet before the storm. Samuel arrived home at his usual time. The house was peaceful, a sanctuary from the charged atmosphere of the gym. He didn't turn on the television or the radio. He moved through the quiet rooms, the setting sun casting long, orange stripes across the floor. He went to the hall closet and reached up to the top shelf, pulling down a dusty cardboard box. He brought it to the kitchen table. He opened it. Inside, nestled in yellowed tissue paper, were his old fighting shoes and the cracked leather gloves Pops had shown Marcus. He didn't put them on. He simply took the gloves out and set them on the table. He ran a hand over the worn leather, feeling the indentations his own knuckles had made a lifetime ago. He could almost smell it, the liniment, the sweat, the resin, the electric tang of a roaring crowd. He was not sentimental about it. He was reconnecting with a part of himself he had put away, not out of shame, but out of necessity. He was reintroducing himself to the warrior. He closed his eyes and let himself feel it for exactly 5 minutes. The focus, the discipline, the cold, analytical mind that lived inside the heat of combat. Then, he put the gloves back in the box and returned it to the shelf. Marcus arrived for dinner at 7. He found his father in the kitchen, breading chicken cutlets. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the air. There was no tension, no talk of strategy. They fell into the easy, comfortable rhythm of family. This was the family anchor. This was what they were fighting for. Not just an abstract concept of dignity, but this. The right to exist peacefully, to cook a meal, to share a table, without the world trying to diminish you. Mom used to love when you made this, Marcus said, leaning against the counter. She said it was the only thing I cooked better than her, Samuel replied, a rare, small smile touching his lips. I never told her I got the recipe from her mother. They ate on the back porch as twilight settled over the garden. They talked about Marcus's prospects as a coach, about a young fighter he was training who had real potential, about the tomatoes in Samuel's garden that were just starting to ripen. They did not speak the name Kyler. They did not mention the $30,000 or the public apology. They didn't need to. The understanding between them was as solid and silent as the foundation of the house. After dinner, as Marcus was getting ready to leave, he paused at the door. "Are you sure, Dad?" he asked, the question carrying all the weight of the moment. Samuel was standing in his living room. He turned to his son, and then he did something Marcus hadn't seen him do in 30 years. He dropped into a classic boxer's stance. His feet were perfectly placed. His hands came up, not in fists, but open, relaxed. He began to move. It was not the explosive movement of a young fighter, but something far more refined. A slow, hypnotic rhythm. A slight pivot of the hips, a subtle dip of the shoulder, a gentle sway of the head. It was shadowboxing as a form of Tai Chi. Each movement was economical, purposeful, and perfectly balanced. The muscle memory was not just intact, it was deeply embedded, a language his body had never forgotten. He was a master craftsman checking his tools. "The body remembers," Samuel said, his voice as smooth as his movements. "The only thing that gets old is the ego. His is ancient. Mine. I let mine go a long time ago." Marcus watched, mesmerized. He was not watching a janitor. He was not even just watching his father. He was watching Samuel Silent Sam Washington, a ghost from the history of the sport, preparing to give one last, unforgettable lesson. He left that night with no fear, only a profound and soaring sense of anticipation. Friday morning arrived, bright and clear. Samuel Washington rose at 5:03 a.m. He made his bed. He ground his coffee. He sat on his porch for exactly 15 minutes. The ritual was his anchor. It was the source of his calm. When he dressed for work, he chose his uniform with extra care. It was clean, pressed, a suit of armor made of blue cotton. His dignity was his weapon, and he wore it well. He was not a fighter preparing for a bout. He was a teacher preparing for a class, and class was now in session. By 11:45 a.m., Apex Boxing and Athletics Club was packed. It was a circus. The usual gym members were there, but so were others, people from nearby offices on their lunch break, a handful of local sports personalities who had caught wind of the strange event, and the ever-present flock of Kyler's sycophants. The air was buzzing with a low, predatory excitement. Phones were already out, held aloft, ready to capture the expected slaughter. Henderson, the manager, stood near the ring, looking nervous, constantly checking his watch. The sports blogger was there, a cynical smirk on his face, ready to write his colorful story. At high noon, King Kyler made his grand entrance. He was in full championship regalia, a silk robe with King Kyler emblazoned in gold on the back, gleaming white trunks, and brand new gloves. He was playing the part to the hilt. He jogged to the ring, his entourage parting the sea of onlookers for him. He vaulted the ropes, raised his arms to the cheering crowd, and bounced on his toes, a picture of supreme confidence and power. He was an actor who loved his role. A minute later, the side door opened. A hush fell over the crowd. Samuel Washington walked in. He was not wearing a robe or boxing trunks. He was wearing his janitor's uniform. Blue work pants, sturdy black shoes, and the blue button-up shirt with Samuel stitched over the pocket. The contrast was stark and deeply intentional. Kyler was dressed for a fight. Samuel was dressed for work. He walked toward the ring not with the swagger of a fighter, but with the steady, deliberate pace of a man on his way to fix a leaky pipe. There was no fear in his stride. There was only purpose. Marcus and Pops were with him. They were his cornermen. They flanked him as he walked through the silent crowd. When they reached the ring, Samuel didn't vault the ropes. He calmly parted them and stepped through, as if entering a room. Kyler laughed from his corner. "Finally decided to show up for your beating, old man," he shouted. Samuel ignored him. In the center of the ring, Marcus helped his father. He didn't wrap his hands in gauze and tape. He didn't grease his face with Vaseline. He simply helped Samuel unbutton and remove his work shirt, folding it neatly and handing it to Pops. Underneath, Samuel wore a simple, clean, heather gray t-shirt. He was still wearing his work pants and shoes. The message was clear. This was not his world. He was just visiting on his own terms. The referee, a nervous gym employee, gave them their final, absurd instructions. Kyler sneered the entire time. They touched gloves. Kyler's punch-perfect glove against Samuel's bare, wrinkled hand. Then the bell rang. The sound echoed through the gym. Kyler came out of his corner like a bull. He wanted to end it quickly, brutally. He threw a storm of punches, jabs, hooks, crosses, all aimed at the old man's head. And Samuel began to move. It was exactly as Marcus had seen the night before. But now it was real. He didn't run. He didn't dance. He stood in a small pocket of space in the center of the ring, and he simply wasn't there. A half-inch slip to the left, and a jab sliced past his ear. A slight shoulder roll, and a powerful right cross slid harmlessly off his deltoid. A subtle dip of the knees, and a wild hook sailed over his head, fanning his silver hair. His feet barely shuffled on the canvas. His movements were so small, so economical, they were almost imperceptible. He was a master of subtraction, removing himself from the path of violence by the barest of margins. The crowd, which had been baying for blood, grew quiet. They were confused. They had come to see a knockout. Instead, they were witnessing something strange and hypnotic. Kyler's punches, which looked so devastating on television, were hitting nothing but air. He was fighting a ghost. After the first minute, Kyler's frustration began to show. His movements became bigger, sloppier. He started loading up, throwing haymakers. He was breathing heavily, his face slick with sweat. Samuel, by contrast, was breathing easily, his expression as calm as if he were watching traffic go by. There was a look in his eyes, not of fear, but of pity. He was analyzing, reading, processing. That wasn't a man in a fight. That was a grandmaster watching a novice play checkers. 2 minutes in, Kyler was furious. The spectacle he had imagined was turning into a farce, with him as the punchline. He let out a roar of frustration and lunged, throwing a desperate, telegraphed overhand right, the kind of punch that could knock down a wall. This was the moment Samuel had been waiting for. He didn't dodge it. He didn't block it. He used the oldest, purest trick in the book of defensive boxing. As the punch came, he pivoted, sinking his weight and rolling his left shoulder forward. Kyler's fist, aimed for Samuel's jaw, connected with the hard, round muscle of his shoulder. The force of the blow glanced off the surface. But Kyler had thrown everything into it. All his weight, all his momentum, all his rage. With nothing solid to stop him, he was wildly overextended. His balance was gone. Samuel did not hit him. He simply took a single step back. Kyler, propelled by his own uncontrolled force, stumbled forward. He pinwheeled his arms, trying to regain his footing, but it was too late. He crashed, face first, not onto the canvas, but through the ropes, his body flopping ignominiously onto the ring apron. He had knocked himself down. The irony was devastating. A collective gasp went through the crowd. At that exact moment, the bell rang. The 3 minutes were up. The gym was utterly silent. Kyler, tangled in the ropes, pushed himself up, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated humiliation and fury. He had failed. He had not landed a single clean punch. He scrambled back into the ring, his eyes wild. The bell didn't matter to him. His pride was shattered. He lunged at Samuel, intent on doing the damage he had failed to do legally. But Marcus was already moving. He stepped between them, his hand firm on Kyler's chest, stopping him dead. The bell rang. "Kyler, it's over. You lost." Kyler tried to shove past him, his face contorted in a snarl. He made me look like a fool. And that's when Marcus, his voice filled with a decade of quiet pride and a moment of explosive, righteous fury, pointed past Kyler at his father, who stood calmly in the corner, not even breathing hard. He didn't make you look like anything. Marcus's voice boomed through the silent gym, a cry of pure, cathartic vindication. That man is Samuel Silent Sam Washington, a champion you aren't worthy to share a ring with. That's my father. The name, Silent Sam Washington, hung in the air. To the younger crowd, it meant nothing. But to the older trainers, to the sports blogger, to Pops who stood at ringside with a triumphant grin, it was a thunderclap from the past. Pops chose that exact moment to walk over to the stunned blogger and hand him a thick manila folder. The box of evidence. Inside were the clippings, the photos, the story of the man Kyler had just tried, and failed, to bully. The lesson was over. The reckoning had just begun. The aftermath was swift and brutal, a perfect storm of public humiliation and professional consequence. The blogger, holding the folder of evidence like a sacred text, furiously typed into his phone. His cynical smirk was gone, replaced by the electric excitement of a journalist who had just stumbled upon the story of a lifetime. His post, which went live less than 10 minutes after the bell, was no longer a fluff piece. It was a bombshell. Boxing's forgotten ghost, Silent Sam Washington, humiliates King Kyler without throwing a punch. It detailed the backstory, the bullying, the wager, and the sublime, poetic justice of the 3-minute masterclass. Simultaneously, Leo's videos began to surface. The first, capturing Kyler's initial, contemptuous challenge, and the second, capturing his eager acceptance of the humiliating terms. The narrative was clear, damning, and irrefutable. Kyler wasn't a benevolent champion. He was a cruel bully who had been outsmarted and outclassed by a legend he had mistaken for a janitor. By the end of the day, the story was national news. Sports networks were playing the clips on a loop. The image of the undefeated champion falling through the ropes from his own momentum, juxtaposed with the image of the calm, elderly man in a gray t-shirt, was an irresistible David and Goliath tale. The machine, which had been so quick to protect Kyler, now turned on him. Sponsors began to issue statements. The Boxing Commission announced a formal investigation into his conduct. His next title defense was put on indefinite hold. A week later, the reckoning came to the gym. Henderson, seeing the tidal wave of bad press, had no choice. Kyler was summoned to the center of the ring, not for a fight, but for his public penance. The gym was quiet. The mood was somber. Kyler, dressed in street clothes, looked smaller, his arrogance stripped away. He held a microphone, his hand trembling slightly. Samuel stood a few feet away, with Marcus by his side. He was in his work uniform. He had just finished mopping the floor. Kyler mumbled into the microphone. I want to apologize. To Mr. Samuel Washington, he could barely make eye contact. My conduct was unprofessional and disrespectful. He is a man of great dignity and a true legend of the sport. I was wrong. It was a forced, hollow apology, but the humiliation was the true punishment. He then presented an oversized check for $30,000, made out to the Apex Youth Boxing Initiative. After the brief, awkward ceremony, Kyler was escorted out of the gym by Henderson. He was effectively exiled, his career in tatters. As he walked past the spot where he had first confronted Samuel, he saw the old man, quietly buffing a scuff mark from the floor with his shoe. Samuel did not look up. He did not gloat. The justice was not in Kyler's fall, but in the restoration of order. In the months that followed, the culture of the gym began to change. Henderson, humbled and eager to repair the gym's image, fully funded the youth program. He also commissioned a new display for the lobby. Alongside the posters of modern champions, a new, larger frame was hung. It was a beautifully restored black and white photograph of a young Samuel Silent Sam Washington in his prime, his eyes focused, his guard perfect. Beneath it, a brass plaque detailed his professional record and his Pan American Games victory. The final scene of the story took place on a quiet Tuesday morning, several months later. The gym was just waking up. Samuel was there, as always, making his rounds. He paused in the lobby, in front of the new display. He sprayed a bit of cleaner on a soft cloth and carefully wiped the glass over his own picture. He saw his own reflection, The face of a 67-year-old man with silver hair, superimposed over the face of the young warrior he had been. He looked at the two faces, the beginning and the continuation of the same man, and a small, quiet smile touched his lips. "Mr. Washington." He turned. It was Leo, the young welterweight. Can you show me that shoulder roll again?" Leo asked, his voice full of a new, profound respect. "The one you used." Samuel's smile widened slightly. He handed his cleaning cloth to the young man. "Hold this," he said, and in the quiet morning light of the gym lobby, under the watchful eye of his own past, the old janitor began to teach the young fighter. He was passing it on. The knowledge, the discipline, the dignity. The balance had been restored, not just in the gym, but in the world. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked two special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.